Right. I get to see you. So, hey, sorry, I'm talking to my group members here, but hello everyone. I am Dr. Alicia, and here we are. It's part 3, or it's really not part 3. This is just my third time talking about the continuation of this book, How to Be an Adult in Relationships, and we're going to be discussing 3 of the 5 keys to mindful loving, and this is the author David Richo. And I'm really enjoying a lot of this book, and I'm going to record it and have it available for people to watch. So eventually, I may, depending on how things go, I may make this unavailable at some point. But we have it today. We're here today. Hello, everyone. We are discussing how to be an adult in relationships. And last week, part 2. Hey, Dr. Vibe, how you doing? Last week for part 2, we discussed the first 2 of the 5 A's. So there's 5 A's for mindful loving. Listen, this is the book that you need if you are interested in having a loving relationship with somebody. If this is your goal in life, I want to have a loving relationship with someone. Here are the tools. And David Richo talks about it. It's in its 20th anniversary edition. It's been translated into other languages, and I think it's so important for us to incorporate these wonderful techniques into our lives. So last week when we discussed the first 2 of the 5 A's, and that was attention. Y'all been paying attention to people? And acceptance, and having acceptance. So attention, let's recap. Attention means being able to attune to a person. That means putting your phone down, getting rid of distractions. To have a loving relationship with someone, you have to give them your undivided attention. And I'm not talking about this has to happen 24 hours out of the day. We all know we got things that we have to do, but you have to carve out time, particularly for your children, because a lot of the wounds that happen right now in our lives, all of us are wounded, myself included. It happens because at some point, someone did not give me the 5 A's that I needed, right? And it could be that you had busy parents. Parents love you dearly, but they're busy and they're tired, and all of these other barriers happen where you're in a position where you're not giving the 5 A's, right? So, but today and from last week, you can start doing this to each other, because this is how you get rid of toxic behavior. I was talking about this earlier with another group that I met with earlier today about the toxic culture that we live in, right? This is an answer to the toxic culture, because if you think about it, a lot of what we encounter in our culture is nothing to do with mindful loving. And I think we need to bring back this mindfulness in how we interact with each other, how we react to each other when we're triggered, right? So being curious about ourselves and curious about the world around us, and to live the life of a Buddha. Say what you want about Buddha, but it's really ancient science. It's our science. The techniques of the Buddha is our science, and you know what I'm talking about, right? So it's going to take us to do the first 2 A's, and that is going to be attention, giving attention, undivided attention to someone, carving out time to do that. And with the attention, it's also accepting, not judging, right? So, and those 2 I talked about last week. So today we're going to keep going. I'm Dr. Alicia. I didn't introduce myself. I just assume y'all know who I am. I'm Dr. Alicia. I'm a therapist. I am a social worker, and I teach at a university. I teach adults how to become therapists. That's my full-time job. And I'm always up on all the current techniques, all of the current research and data and information about how best to live in an environment where we're all behaving as adults. And we can't accept or we can't expect children to be an adult. So what do I mean by that? First of all, I do want to talk about what I mean by that, because number one, we need to get away from throwing these labels at people, right? So for lack of a better word, narcissism is a label that's being thrown all over the place, right? So, and it is a clinical term. I've never in my entire life, I've been a licensed therapist 20 years. I've been doing clinical work over 20 years. I've never diagnosed anybody with narcissistic personality disorder. Very rarely do therapists diagnose someone with a personality disorder. Number one, it's very difficult to do. Number two, you have to be specifically trained in this. And number three, I don't see how diagnosing someone helps that person. For insurance purposes, we as therapists and other therapists, you can ask them what they think about diagnoses. The DSM-5 is what we use to diagnose. I only use that for insurance purposes. I do not sit and say, as a therapist, licensed therapist for 20 years, over 20 years, 21, going on 22 years now, I've never diagnosed anybody with a narcissistic personality disorder or any personality disorders. Now, they can have behaviors that's unhealthy, and I focus my treatment on the behaviors. I do not like to focus on the diagnosis necessarily, because it's just for insurance purposes, because insurance companies have to have a diagnosis from the ICD-10 or the ICD-9. Now it's the 10, the DSM-5, all of these terms. Regular people don't know about this, and you shouldn't know about it. So I really get kind of worked up when people use these clinical terms and they use it as a weapon against other people. I don't want to get into that. But one thing I will say, good evening, Joanne. One thing I will say is that children are narcissistic. They are. That's just how they are, right? It's appropriate. But for us, being an adult in relationships, particularly in relationship with our children, we have to understand that this is a normal part of the development. And our job as parents is to be the adult, so that we can show children how to be empathetic, how to love others. Children learn how to love based on how we love them. And that's what this book has been talking about, that some of us, when we are adults, we can retreat and go back to what's called the wounded child, right? We can go back to this because at some point in our lives, that person who was taking care of us failed to give us one or all of the 5 A's, right? So I'm saying all that to say, let's throw the labels out the door. Let's stop labeling each other, and let's focus on behaviors, which is what I do in my practice. I focus on behaviors, and I also teach and show and demonstrate how to be an adult, how to deal with the range of feelings that all of us have in a way that's healthy. So that's what we're doing today. So that's a big introduction. I just spent, 10 minutes or so talking about this. So I think that's so important. So the very first thing, again, to recap what we talked about last week, was the first A was attention. Children need attention. Your spouse needs your undivided attention. I need it from my husband. He needs it from me, and it's funny because sometimes children do need attention and they act out. They act out in many ways. And it's great for us as parents to be able to recognize, oh, this is an act. Sometimes it's an act of having attention. So it's great to give positive feedback to our children. Also, acceptance. No one wants to feel that you're judging them. Nobody, none of y'all who are here talking to me wants me to sit here and diagnose everybody. Nobody wants to be diagnosed. And as a therapist, I'm always diagnosing, right? I mean, how could you not be judging? But I'm not weaponizing this diagnosis. I know that you have to have something for insurance, something there, or I won't get paid for my services. And I need to get paid because, darn it, I'm trained. I know what I'm doing. I'm trained in my work. So that is just something for all of us to keep in mind. I think this is to cut through some of the toxic culture that we live in. Toxic culture, right? Okay. So the third aspect is appreciation. That is the third lesson that we're going to go through today, the last three of the 5 A's of keys to mindful loving. Mindful loving. One thing we need to do is to show appreciation. And let's see. There was something I wanted to say. So we talked about attention and acceptance. Okay, appreciation. Appreciation gives depth to acceptance. Appreciation says, hey, I admire you. I delight in you. I prize you. I respect you. I acknowledge you in all your potential. And think about this. If your children misbehaves, how do you appreciate them, even if they're being naughty? And one thing that I encourage parents to do is to separate the child from the behavior. And so one thing you could say to your children when you're disciplining them, because they need you to discipline them, is you can say, what you did was unacceptable, but you are better than that. This is how I feel when I talk about our toxic culture. I talk about, I don't know, Sexy Red and other people in our toxic hip hop culture. Not all hip hop is toxic, but there's aspects of hip hop that is toxic. And when I look at that, I say to myself, this song does not represent who and what this person really is. The behavior and the act of the oppressive behavior that we see all Black women in media go through this, but all of this behavior that I see, for instance, Sexy Red or some other people in hip hop, you are better than this. All of us are to be admired, to be delighted in, to be a prize, to be respected, and to be acknowledged in all of their potential, and to be appreciated as unique. And whenever our behavior falls outside of that, that behavior is incorrect, but still you have to still come across in a way where you still appreciate their God-given gifts. So that's the challenge for all of us this week is, how do we look at people and things that they do that's naughty or things that they do that's disrespectful to themselves? How do we look at their behavior and separate the behavior from who and what they are? Because all of us have the healing ability within ourselves. We are all of these things. This description is the description of every single one of us here. Sometimes our behavior falls out of that because sometimes we don't see ourselves in this way. And hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So we're all unique, right? So to acquire the riches of personal worth and self-confidence, we need such encouragement. So if you want to instill personal worth and self-confidence in the people that you love, your partner, your spouse, your children, you have to be able to say this to them and to come across to them in this way. Human evolution proceeds from human accomplishments and consequent validations. Okay. But it also proceeds from one's faith and another's value. You are better than this. You did something you weren't supposed to do, but guess what? You're better than this. And I expect you to do better than this, right? A parent's belief that a child has great potential actually engenders potential in the child. Long-held, continually affirmed beliefs gives people the capacity to make it come true. I believe in you despite of your flaws, despite of the mistakes that you make. This is the attitude that you have to have with other people in order to be an adult in relationships and to live mindfully, to love mindfully. That doesn't mean staying in a relationship doesn't serve you, okay? You can love from afar, but you can still believe in someone. This is corrective experiences, right? Many centuries of belief in the healing power of faith, for instance, makes more and more faith healings happen. In this end, in all 5 A's, fulfillment of the need instills the quality in the personality. Appreciation, which is the 3rd A, right? Appreciation also includes gratitude for any kindness or gift we might bestow. Appreciation as gratitude recognizes us in how we extend ourselves, because intimacy is about giving and receiving. Appreciation fosters closeness. When we give, we instinctively await a thank you, don't we? Okay? This is not a middle class or selfish expectation, but a wish that the transaction be completed in a normal way. We know something is missing in a relationship if gratitude is lacking. Any little thing someone does to make your life better, I say go overboard with appreciation and gratitude. That's the healthy response. So appreciation is 2 things, according to living in a mindful loving of someone. Appreciation is 2 things. Number 1, it's focusing on behavior that's unacceptable, but knowing that the person is acceptable. The second aspect of that is recognizing the great things that people do and showing appreciation and gratitude for those things and giving a thank you. Any little thing. If your husband takes the trash out, they take the trash out every week. Maybe the first 2 weeks you said, I appreciate that, but it could be year 11 and they take the trash out. Make a conscious effort to say, God, I so appreciate you taking the trash out. We don't have to think about it. Don't you contribute so wonderful to the family? Any little thing anybody does that makes anybody's life better, show appreciation for it. I'm telling you, I do a lot of couples work. And it is so interesting. I want to pause for a little bit and talk about some of the couples work I do, because I remember, for instance, I'm not going to give anything away with confidentiality, but, I'll sit with a couple, for instance, and they'll be complaining back and forth at each other. And then I'll say, okay, what can this person do to show appreciation? You're saying that your wife doesn't appreciate you. What is it that she can do? Let's come up with some brainstorming solutions. What is it that that person can do? Anything. What is it that that person can do? And do you know 9 times out of 10, do you know what I typically get from husbands? They usually say, I would just like a hug and a kiss. They don't ask for it. I said, is that it? They're like, no, I want a hug and a kiss. And I'm just thinking in my mind, why don't you just ask for that? But they don't. They act out. They misbehave, they get pouty, they get, but why not just ask for what you need? But you don't, and I'm amazed, because even I asked a wife one time who felt unappreciated. She had a job, she was taking care of the kids, running the household. And I asked her, I said, what is it that your husband can do to demonstrate appreciation for you? And do you know what she said? She said something like, I just want him to hold my hand and go for a walk around the block. I said, well, how long is that going to take? Less than 5 minutes. All she wanted was to hold my hand and to go around the block. And this is not unusual. I typically get those answers when I ask, what does appreciation look like? It costs you nothing. Not once have I ever had a wife say, well, if he bought me a new car, I would feel appreciated. Or if he took me to get my hair done, I'd feel appreciated. Or if he took me out to dinner, I'd feel appreciated. I have never gotten that answer from a wife. From a husband, I've never gotten anything sexual. I've never gotten anything that you would think a husband or a wife would ask for from each other. It's always something like a hug, a kiss, hold my hand, go for a walk. It's always something that builds that connection. So appreciation is all about connection. And I'm just telling you that has been my experience working with couples over the years, that is what they really want and feel like they need is appreciation. So appreciation is big. Let's see. What I want to go, let's go here. At times in a relationship, you do not feel appreciated. You complain. Yes, they complain. They don't feel appreciated, start complaining. You complain and maybe blow up. That is really interesting. So you complain and then you blow up. The blow up to me as a therapist is a trigger. So in something can be triggered because it's reminiscent of something else. So, you know, the best way for me to explain triggers is that if we were all to pat each other on the back, right? You pat each other on the back, that's nothing, right? It's just a pat on the back. The act is not triggering because you're patting yourself on the back. If anything, it's like, oh, good job, pat yourself on the back. Now, what if you spent a week in Miami and you were laid out on the beach and the sun was beating down on you and you're sore and the skin's peeling off and you have a really, really sunburn, and someone comes up to you and pats you on the back, you're going to go, ah, you know, it's going to hurt. The reason why it hurts is because that's a trigger of a pain from the sun. So it's not the act that's the trigger. It's the reaction to it that creates the quote unquote trauma in you. And then that's where you say, wait, hold on. I pat your back all the time, or I pat myself on the back. I do this all the time. Start to become curious about it and say, what is it about me patting you on the back that's causing you to blow up? And that person can say, well, you know what? I was in Miami for a week and the sun damaged. So this is a painful point in my life. So this is a great metaphor with what happens to all of us when we're all triggered. It, from the outside looking in, it's just a regular question I asked, or it's a regular pat on the back. Like, that shouldn't be something that would be concerning, but it was for you because given your circumstances, you were damaged in some way on your shoulder. So that is the type of mindful loving that I wish people did more from each other. Again, our toxic culture and environment that we live in, they don't take the time to say, hey, hold on, what is it about this that's making you complain and blow up? So we need to have more conversations about that. And that is how you learn to appreciate someone. You show appreciation for their experiences. Okay? All right, let's move on. Behind every complaint about a partner is a longing for one of the 5 A's. The accurate and compassionate response of a partner who interprets your complaint as a bid for love. I love when my husband complains about me. I'm like, what did I do? Tell me what it is, because I know him telling me, I know it means that he loves me. So let's change the way we look at complaints. If he didn't love me, he wouldn't even complain because it wouldn't make a difference. But the complaint is saying, I have a need and I really want you to feel it. And I hear it as that. What do we tend to do when we hear a complaint? Anybody know, Dr. Vibe, do you know what people tend to do? DMAC. What do people tend to do when they hear a complaint? Joanne, Indigo, Cancer Sun, Child, anybody in the chat, what do people tend to do when they hear a complaint? Any of y'all know? Before I give the answer, 9 times out of 10, thank you, Tina, they do get defensive. The very first thing they do is get defensive. Now, given this complaint, all it is I need you to love me. I feel unloved. If you start to hear it that way, then the complaint department is down the hall. Yeah, Muhammad, you be the complaint department. And part of it is creating an environment where the person feels comfortable coming to you with their concerns. Now, complaint is different from criticism, because criticism is name calling, criticism is put downs, criticisms are abusive, toxic, right? So someone could come to you and say, "You're so stupid. What are you thinking?" And then you say, "Wait, hold on. Can you say that again in a way that's a little more descriptive?" Like, don't label somebody. What's wrong with you? No, be a little more descriptive. So you could be the change person in this. You could say, no. That's criticism. I'm hearing a complaint. What is your complaint? Because that I want to hear. I'm the complaint department. K.A. Muhammad. That's a beautiful one. I love it. Yeah, Dr. Vibe, defensive and pushback. That's a learned reaction, by the way. Okay. I see you are feeling unappreciated. That's what you say to somebody when they complain. I want you to know I do appreciate you very much. That's what adults do. Children get defensive, children push back, adults listen. She hears your real feelings rather than your harsh words. She attunes to the hurt, longing robin in you, not the angry animal that swoops down on her. Later, when things have calmed down, she reminds you that in the future, you can ask for appreciation directly. All this work in reverse when your partner is the one who is feeling unappreciated. That's the biggest complaint I get in marriages, is feeling unappreciated. And it's so easy to do because you just forget. You going on with your life and you do appreciate that person. But I think a lot of us kind of fall down and fall back on vocalizing appreciation or talking about appreciation. We all fall back on it. Yeah, Dr. Vibe, that's the difference between a critique and a criticism. But even in a criticism, my challenge to you guys is to hear the hurt in the criticism. Come back later and say, you know you ain't supposed to be calling me names. I need an apology for that. But I hear the pain. Okay? And it's not pathological. It's not pathological that you did not get the appreciation that you felt like you needed, or one of the 5 A's, or a person didn't pay attention to you, or whatever it is in your background. Do not use that as a weapon. Well, what's wrong with you is that your mama didn't pay enough attention to you, and that ain't my fault. Deal with your mama issues. Do not talk to your partner that way. Resist the urge to do that. Say, I hear that this was a struggle for you, and guess what? We're going to have a corrective experience because I'm going to make sure that I give you all of the attention and the respect and the appreciation that you did not get. And that's how you cut through this toxic culture. That's how you reset toxic culture that we live in. I named it. It's toxic. Okay, so that's appreciation. The God in me sees the God in you, basically. Okay. All right. Affection. Okay. Affection is the 4th A for mindful loving. And Oh gosh. Anyway, let me read about affection, then I'll give you my illustration. To give and receive love is our primary need. Okay? We express emotionally, spiritually, and physically. An affectionate touch or hug from someone who really loves us can penetrate our body and restore our souls. Not how much is in your banking account, not how much money I give you. It is the loving appreciation and touch that everybody needs. All our fears, no matter how deep, can be erased by a single loving stroke. Okay, so I'll go into my illustration. God, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I bought this audiobook called Peaceful Parenting. And it was interesting because I played it. It was an audiobook, so I played it in the car. And at the time, I did a lot of riding around with my children. They were young, much younger. And so as I was listening to the audiobook, they were listening to the audiobook. And it talked all about peaceful parenting and how parents yell at their kids. And, you know, you shouldn't yell at your children. You should try to understand them more, right? So that's the basis of peaceful parenting. I highly recommend people listen to that because it's peaceful. It really is peaceful living. Everybody should be treated this way, including children. So sometimes the kids would be acting naughty and I would raise my voice at them and they would stop and go, Mom, peaceful parenting. So they would use it against me. And I'd be like, oh my God, y'all are crazy. So it became a joke between all of us. But part of what that book talked about was that when your children misbehave, when they do things that they're not supposed to be doing and they don't follow the rules, according to this book, this is your child's scream for attention. This is their way of needing attention, but not having the ability to articulate it. And in addition to the attention, they really need affection. So what I did was I would ask my son or my daughters or whatever to do something. And then I would turn around and they weren't doing it like I told them. And I would be like, oh, this is your need for a hug. So every time they would be naughty, I would just walk up to them and I say, oh, you're not doing what I asked you to do because deep down inside, you really need a hug from me. So I would just hug them. And it didn't matter where we were. We'd be in public. We would be like with their friends. We would do all that. I would just come up to them and just give them a big fat hug. And believe it or not, even my oldest child, who was at the time, he was in high school, it worked. Like I could tell he felt kind of, I started reminding, it was a reminder to myself that children, especially big kids, my son was in high school at the time, even they need love and affection, even teenagers, no matter what, from little infants to big grown teenage boys who much, much taller than me, even they need love and affection from me. So I love this thing about affection and your partner. And, as appropriate, as deemed appropriate, we'll need some affection. Let's see. Let's move on. Okay, let me read this part. Love cannot be defined in a universal way. Okay, so they talked about affection is cultural. He goes into that. But one thing I want to start with, love in adulthood is re-experiencing the love of our every cell. Love in adulthood is a re-experiencing of the love our every cell remembers. The way we were loved early in life is the way we want to be loved in all our lives. Most of us know just what it takes for us to feel loved. What we have to learn is how to ask for it instead of acting out, because children act it out. As adults, we need to vocalize it, right? A partner is not a mind reader. Yes, we cannot read your mind. I'm working on being clairvoyant. That's one thing. I've been reading books about how to be clairvoyant, but I can't all the time. So it is up to each of us to tell our partner what our brand of love is. And if we have to teach our partner how to love us, we also have to learn how to love him or her. Knowing this makes it clear that love is not a sentimental feeling, but a conscious choice to give and receive in unique and often challenging ways. Loving is the easiest and the hardest thing we'll ever do. Sometimes it is very difficult to ask for what you want when you're not getting it because you're not used to asking for it. Sometimes as children, we are taught, not directly, but we are taught to be seen and not heard, to not ask for what we want because you're just a child. And we're not used and accustomed to this. So to go on needing something as children and we're not able to vocalize it, we are not even used to vocalizing it. We're not comfortable to vocalizing what we need from our parents. We go along life feeling deprived and not having the language to say what we really need. So children act it out. And just know this. Just know that this dynamic happens. And be reflective because we're now adults. Okay? And by the way, when you're triggered, you go back to being the hurt child. So sometimes when people are triggered, they're very childish. They act in ways that are really childish. But it makes sense because you're going back to that hurtful time in your life. So this is just a dynamic that happens, right? Children being seen and not heard and carrying it into adulthood. Yeah, you need to be able. And that's what makes it really hard to do because you don't feel you're worthy of even asking for what you want because you're not accustomed to that. So showing affection in teaching someone how to love you, it's something that you have to consciously work on. Okay. So let's move on. The word affection comes from affect, feeling. Affection refers to closeness, both on the physical and on the feeling level. Physically, it includes the spectrum of touch, not intercourse, but touch, right? Affection is also a quality of feeling. In this respect, it includes kindleness, consideration, thoughtfulness, playfulness, and romantic gestures, like giving flowers or remembering a special anniversary. Affection flows from a genuine liking of somebody. Okay. So they go on about what it means, but it also says, as a wise adult, I know the difference between intercourse or sex with someone who is doing it in a way he or she does it, or in the way that person expects you to do it, in a way that arises from our special bond. Real love does not come off the rack. It is uniquely tailored to each other. So if you're in a relationship, what worked before can't work again in this relationship. So you got to change it up a little bit depending on who you're with. And that's part of the intimacy. I do know I'm going to do some work with, I have a friend who's a sex therapist, and I want to do some work with her coming up. And that's around sex therapy. Y'all don't know. To become a certified sex therapist, you have to go through start all over again with your graduate studies. And that was something I just didn't feel like I wanted to do, but she's done it. So I would love to bring her in and have her talk about some of these things some more. I got to plan and figure out what that's going to look like. Okay, so mindfulness is the path of loving presence. Mindful contact is unconditional and granting of the 5 A's and conditioned by the creation of the ego, such as fear, demand, expectation, judgment, or control. Is the following description of mindful affection familiar? You are loved the way you are. The need for affection is fulfilled when you are loved unconditionally all the time and genuinely liked most of the time. This loving and liking is demonstrated both verbally and physically. Such loving or liking confers a sense of personal power and fosters your being comfortable in your own skin. In childhood, physical contact has no external or sexual component, right? That's not appropriate, by the way. This makes it possible to feel safe and prized for who and what you are rather than for what you can provide to fulfill in inappropriate needs of a parent. Every cell of your little body knew the difference between being held and supportedly and being clutched to fulfill a parent's needs. Yeah, so sometimes needy parents do all sorts of things. So to be an adult in relationships, you can't put your wants and desires and needs onto your child, right? You know when something was being given and when it's being taken. Yeah, I think, well, let's continue on. By the way, no, I'm going to say it now. Men, I do want to talk about men. I have a lot of male clients, and I talk with a lot of married men and their spouses. And a lot of them absolutely enjoy physical touch, not necessarily in a sexual way. That's just one thing I've noticed. For some reason, and we all have like love languages. For, I won't say all, but for most of the men that I work with, physical touch is so important for them. And I'm not even talking about sexually. they just enjoy that physical touch. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think men need that level of intimacy of physical touch, and it's typically their love language. And it kind of makes sense in a way. I've talked about this before because even as infants, there have been studies done about monkeys. Y'all familiar with the monkey study? There have been studies done about monkeys where they'll have an infant monkey, and on one side of the cage will be milk, food, but it'll be like a little ball with prickly things sticking out of it, but there's food there. On the other side of the cage will be no food, but there'll be a nice warm blanket or something really warm and cuddly. And 100% of those monkeys will forego food just so that they can cuddle with somebody. And we now know this in human beings with this failure to thrive. You can give a baby sustenance for their body, but if you don't cuddle them and you don't hug them, they will not thrive. So physical touch, I'm going to argue physical touch is more important than food and water. And not only for monkeys, but for us as human beings, we need to have this affection. It is not a want, it is a need. And for a lot of men, I think that this is definitely a need. They like to cuddle and physical touch. So that's just something to keep in mind. It is physical touch fulfills a need above and beyond food. Anyway, so I wanted to say that. Okay, so let's move on about compassion. Compassion is a form of affection. It is love's response to pain. Love's response to pain. Someone is acknowledging your pain in a caring way. This has a soothing quality. It is a sure sign to us that we are loved. When you are in pain, is somebody being compassionate to you? In our toxic culture, we see a lot of people in pain. I see absolutely no compassion for it. I see a lot of blame. I see a lot of finger pointing. I see a lot of destructive behaviors. And that's childish, because being an adult in relationships is seeing someone's pain and acting in a way that's compassionate. Okay. This has a soothing quality. It is also a sure sign to us that we are loved. In fact, the compassion we receive throughout life is the equivalent of parental nutrients. Okay. This is also found in the wild. I was just reading an article the other day about elephants, that when a herd, elephants gather in herds. Let me see if I can get it right. Elephants gather in herds. Okay, when a female elephant is about to deliver a baby, did you know that the activities of the herd ceases and all of the elephants gather around the birthing mother as they're about to deliver this elephant, this baby elephant, and that they use their tusks to soothe the mother while they're delivering. And when they have their baby, the female elephants come around the baby, because the mom is, y'all have children, y'all know what that's like. It's exhausting, right? Can't believe you did it. But the female elephants will come around the baby and they will soothe the baby and care for the baby while the mother is recovering. Unbelievable. This is innate in animals. It's innate in us to be compassionate. So when we live in this toxic culture, it is not who we are. That is not who we are, to be toxic. Elephants instinctually know this. No one had to you think elephants read this book? Elephants did not read this book. They instinctually know that affection is important. And out of that is the compassion for someone else's pain. Now, I know elephants are really intelligent creatures, but they ain't have to read no book to tell them how to be compassionate, how to give attention, how to be allowing. All of these things that we talk about today, they instinctually do it. And I know that we, especially as Black people, we instinctually know how to do this. It has been beaten out of us because of our history. You know, we are traumatized folks, and not specifically, but in general. And it shows in how we treat each other. Got it? Okay. Since your parents' opinion was so crucial to you early in life, to be unloved makes you feel unlovable and responsible for it. That's the thing. Children who did not get the love that they needed from their parents internalize that and think, parents love their children. My parents didn't love me, therefore I'm unlovable. Therefore, I am responsible for being loved. That is the mind of a child that carries forth in adulthood, by the way. Love can later be equated with measuring up to another's standards and can be tied to a sense of obligation. We may feel this way toward partners all of your life and never know the ancient story behind it. Finally, as one finger is not the hand, affection is not love, but only part of it. To be held and cuddled, but not allowed later to make choices freely without blame will soon be revealed as inadequate and untrustworthy. If any of you all who are single, if you want to be in a loving relationship, you have to believe that you are lovable. The first step to being in a healthy relationship with another person, an intimate relationship, one where there's true intimacy, you have to feel lovable. If you don't feel lovable, no one's going to love you. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's going to be more toxic behavior. more defensiveness, more attacking, more criticism, more blaming. All of these things happen because you don't feel lovable. You're going to be running into terrible situations out there in their streets trying to find a partner. Okay. So that is affection. I didn't think affection would go so deep, but it did, I think. Okay, last but not least, the last one. Okay, wait. So someone typed this in the chat. The 5 A's for the 5 keys, which are the 5 A's for mindful loving, is attention, acceptance, appreciation, and affection. Those are the 4 A's. The 5th one is allowing. Let's see what that means. Allowing. Okay. Human freedom is the right to make choices and act on them. Yes, it is. Yes, I got a lot to say about that. Allowing, as one of the 5 A's, is not permission from parents or partners to be free. It is support from our inherent freedom, encouragement to act on our freedom in ways that benefit us and others, and collaboration in launching us into the freedom to be who we are. Allowing is spreading out the red carpet for us to walk, for us as we walk into fulfillment of our deepest needs, values, and wishes. You're never going to be able to get to that if you don't have the other A's. There's so many of us who have no idea who and what we are. We're waiting on religion to tell us what we are. Not all religion, high control religion. I'll just say that. We're relying on what our parents need and expect from us, but not once. Yeah, Dr. Vibe, it's attention, acceptance, appreciation, and affection. And this one is allowing. Allowing happens because it builds on the other 4. Allowing is spreading out the red carpet for us as we walk into fulfillment of our deepest needs, values, and wishes. You're not going to be able to know what those are for yourself unless you have a warm, inviting environment. Family structure is important, but what is much, much more important than family structure is growing up in the family where you feel loved, a loving environment. And if you did not have a loving environment, sometimes it's more difficult for you to figure out what and who you are. So you have to be in a space where you're able to explore and put on different hats and make mistakes and figure out who and what you are. It is definitely, it's just mandatory for us to figure out who and what we are. In a good enough holding environment early in life, good enough. Listen to this. In a good enough holding environment early in life, there is no perfect environment early in life, but good enough is good enough. So in your marriage, you want it to be a good enough marriage, not a perfect marriage, because perfection doesn't even exist. So stop. A good enough marriage, a good enough environment growing up. I learned that it is safe to be myself, to know and show my deepest needs and wishes. By the way, if you grew up in a high conflict, traumatic environment, you are instantly cut off from who you are because you have to deal with toxicity and trauma. You have to deal with that. And to deal with that means you can't focus on allowing. Allowing is not allowed when the environment you grew up in is toxic. So you're not going to know who you are. You're going to struggle with that. That doesn't mean it's impossible. It can happen. But sometimes you'll struggle with finding out who and what you are if you didn't grow up where, things were where you don't even know who and what you are to even be able to allow anything happen. So you need that space to challenge things, right? Okay. So you need to be able to have a place where you show your deepest needs and wishes, Such openness happens in a family with an embrace wide enough to include all of me. You are okay, all of me. Given such a welcome in the world, I gain a sense of stability and coherence, and I develop a reliable source of self support, a nurturant inner parent who knows how to express feelings, no matter how contradictory or painful they may be. In addition, I reach out for healthy relationships, that is, those that give me all 5 A's. When you were growing up, if you had an opinion that was different from everyone else in your family, did you feel comfortable enough sharing it? Was it accepted? Or was it expected that everybody thinks the same way? Being able to tolerate difference of opinions and thoughts and beliefs, being able to tolerate the difference is what's very important. There are some families where everybody needs to think the same way. And if you dissent from this way of thinking, then you're something's wrong with you. And I mentioned religion because I love religion. I think it serves a great purpose in people's lives. But high control religion, sometimes you have to be cautious because it can create an environment where someone doesn't feel like they can question things. Particularly teenagers need to be in a position where they can question things. And so you have to be in a position where you have someone you can talk to about all of the things that you are questioning and dealing with in a way that you just need to be allowed to do those things so that you can eventually form your own opinion on it. So that's a normal process for children and young adults. Not everyone has the benefit of such a childhood. Some parents set rigid, it's called strictures on eating, sleeping, clothing, and grooming, all to suit their own needs or standards. Rationalizing that such restrictures, that's what he calls it, restrictures, are crucial to a child's health. In our children's home, it may have felt unsafe to be ourselves. We may have noticed that to be real meant losing the love of those from whom we need it the most. You don't feel safe being yourself because you feel like your mom, your dad won't love you anymore and won't give you affection and attention. So there's this need to kind of think like the group. We may then have become whatever others needed us to be as the price of being loved. You can only be loved if you think this way. That's toxic, okay? The false self that resulted must eventually give way to a truer version of intimacy, if intimacy is ever to work for us. If it was never safe to be ourselves, if we had to conceal what we were, we may not really believe in our talents and virtues now. Feeling like imposters and frauds, trying to live in accord with the needs and wishes of others is like being a sergeant and trying to become a duck just because you find yourself living in a duck pond. The false self is that of a conformist whom is a royal heir in hiding. Oh boy, that gets into quite a bit. Psychologically, healthy adults come from a background of flexibility, not severity. Every need, like all needs, are best fulfilled in an atmosphere of joy and forgiveness. You are not supposed to be perfect, right? In such a garden, crocuses ceaselessly pop up, yielding blooms of personal stability and self-nurturant powers, just the qualities that make intimacy possible in later life. Without healthy allowing in childhood, we may choose a controlling partner to tell us, I have to do it this way or else. We do not notice others' attempts to manipulate us, because manipulation is something that's comfortable for you, something that you know about, right? We can be fooled by a relationship that looks good, but is full of demands and expectations. One thing I really like about um, my husband's family, Boyce's family, I spent some time with them not too long ago, is that Boyce's mother, I say Boyce's mom in particular, my husband's mother, she encourages different ways of thinking about things. And I just find that to be so beautiful. Because you can be thinking, and you can see it in Boyce, because he has a whole different perspective on things. But when I see the interaction between he and his mom and their family, I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool, because it's okay to dissent. It's okay to have different points of ways of looking at things. And not only is it, are you allowed to do it, you're encouraged to be unique. So that's one thing I would say, kudos to his family for doing that. They set up this environment. It's not a perfect environment. There is no such thing as perfection there. But one thing I do enjoy about his family is that you can say anything and no one's going to really judge you. You know, you'll be accepted. People still love you no matter what all crazy stuff you can throw out there. So I really love that. And I see that in Boyce's work, because he sees things, different sometimes. Okay, so I just wanted to say that as an illustration here. What else can we say about allowing? Oh, this is about control, right? Let's see. Let me look ahead here and talk about control. Okay, I do want to talk about control. We do not allow others to control us, but we do understand and feel their pain when we realize that their controlling manner is a compulsion. Most controlling people cannot help themselves. They are not in control of the controlling. Yeah, so that's so funny, because I do talk about that with a lot of my clients, that the best way to control things is to give up control. If that makes any sense. Like people who have excessive worry and people who have true feelings of anxiety, not all of them, but a lot of them feel like they need to control all these things. And the fact that they can't control all these things, they feel like they're out of control. But in reality, you can only control yourself, right? So one of the kind of paradox in that is that I challenge a lot of my clients to gain control by just giving up control, not having to control the outcome, because all of the things that you're worried about, it could possibly happen. And you need to acknowledge that, yes, those things can happen. Yes, I can do everything in my power to make sure I don't get the result that I'm afraid of, but it could still happen. And sometimes the X factor, you just have to give up control. I hope that makes sense to all of you all, how giving up control actually helps you to gain control. But anyway, but I do talk about that with a lot of my clients. So most controlling people cannot help themselves. They are not in control of the controlling, right? They are not insulting us by trying to control us. Rather, they automatically take charge and dominate people and situations out of their anxiety, I think. Okay. They do this because of a chilling fear that they cannot handle letting the chips fall where they may. It takes a spiritual person to be liberated from the compulsion to be controlling and to become compassionate toward controlling people. A higher power than ego has to kick in, because ego will not give itself up easily or become gently tolerant. Yes, that is so true. It's a spiritual thing. And I'm not saying that we need to be fatalistic, but I do, and fatalistic is a quality of indigenous populations. And anybody who knows me knows I love I study indigenous populations. I try to the best of my ability, live my life as much as I can in this Western world in a way where it pays honor to indigenous, my indigenous roots. I'll just put it that way. It's who and what I am. So, to become fatalistic is a trait of indigenous populations. They do believe that things are flowing the way it's supposed to be, and it never cannot go the way it's supposed to be. And they trust and believe that. That's a spiritual thing. It's a spiritual thing. So I think some of the 5A's is not to be so tied to the outcome of what your children want. Stop being what you want for your children, letting them explore, and not identifying your worth as a person and as a parent can't be tied to the quote unquote success of your children. I hope that makes sense. It makes perfect sense to me. But that's what allowing does. It is not knowing that you can't control everything, and you shouldn't control everything. They got to live their life. They got to live their life. You have to allow your children to make mistakes. Allow them to explore who and what they are, because that's the best way to learn. Okay. So let's move on. Okay. So they're talking about freedom. If you did not receive the gift of acknowledgement of your freedom, you may have heard, here are some things you may have heard: you will never do as well in school as your brother does. Oh my God, comparing siblings. That's not good, right? As a child, did you feel there's no way to say it? Did you ever have to ask yourself, what does it take to matter here? Or did you know deep down that all it took was to be yourself? Did your parents represent the world as scary? You always have to be careful. Instead of, you have it in you to take care of yourself. Were you not surprised when you first went to school and felt scared and controlled because you had been taught that was somehow how the world was? Yes. This is really something. I so agree with this. I try not to give my children answers when they ask for it. I try to say, hey, no matter what happens in this world, you have the ability in you to overcome it. And I believe in your ability to be strong enough to do it. And that reduces anxiety. Because telling your children that the world is scary and bad things will happen and warning people of all of these things, it can bring out some of the anxiety in them. So the best thing you can say to someone, number one, is to have confidence in your ability to parent, and then have confidence in your children's ability to overcome whatever challenges are there, and letting your children know, hey, if it gets to be too much, you can come to me and I will give you, I won't bail you, don't bail your children out. No helicopter parenting, but what you can give to your children is encouragement that they can figure it out on their own. That's the difference. So if you swoop in and do things for your children, it reduces their confidence that they can do it themselves. You end up being overbearing, and that can cause a lot of anxiety. So I definitely love that paragraph by you, David Richo. He's a therapist, by the way, and he writes like a therapist. So, okay. What's the difference between control and limit setting? Control is meant to make you what others need you to be. Limit setting makes it safe for you to be yourself. Paradoxically, we cannot achieve freedom without limits. The limits persevere the holding environment in which we flourish. Limits are at first the arms around us, and then the word no. Even a sanctuary has gates around it. How else can it provide safety? So we all know this. You have to give limits to your children. You have to be able to say, hey, you can play all you want, but you can't go past that house. You can't go past this house. You can't go here, but the rest of the place, you can go and do whatever you want. Children want this. They beg for this. When they don't have it, they become very anxious. So being yourself and having an environment that's safe and secure for you to explore is what you need to give your children, but it's also what you need to honor and respect in your partner. There's rules to all healthy relationships have rules, and they shouldn't be too restrictive. There should be no, having no rules in a relationship is not healthy, but there's rules in relationships with other people. Say, you can do whatever you want. I don't really care, but just, you need to let me know when things get to a certain point. So these are the conversations you need to have with your partner. Okay. There is a connection between freedom and self-confidence. When you are kept from expressing your deepest needs and wishes, you lose trust in their validity and in your own judgment. You survive by finding out the rules and following them, thus hiding what you really want. You make it your purpose in life to please others rather than to affirm yourself. You're not living authentically when all you're looking for is appraisal and pleasing other people. If you felt free within your family, you can more easily trust a supportive authority, such as loving a teacher or a therapist, somebody of authority. This is mindful authority, without self-blame and unilateral judgment. The elements of ego that create opposition to authority. There's some people who cannot stand authority. Anybody try to tell them anything, they instantly rebel. That lets them know that they grew up in a controlling environment, some of them. When parents gradually share their power with us from childhood into adulthood, they are helping us build a stable sense of self, a sense of personal power and agency. We discovered that Shakespeare referred to in Measure for Measure, I've never read that, but our own unknown sovereignty. Human authority and hierarchy are useful and legitimate when they empower us to take our own initiative, but not when they subjugate and belittle us. When authority, civil or religious, mirrors healthy parenting, it honors us and wins our respect. I mean, that is so true. To give respect, you need to be able to do all of these things with your children and with your partners in order to get respect. They win it. And lastly, as a final note, I distinguish allowing from acceptance. This is what the author is saying. Looking at opposites help us understand differences. The opposite of acceptance is rejection. The opposite of allowing is controlling. Allowing is directed to our choices and actions. Acceptance is directing to our personal traits, our sexual or gender orientation, our way of being in the world as our true selves. Allowing in childhood and young adulthood is directed toward our acting on our choices, our pursuing our interests, marrying or not choosing to marry, right? It's all okay. Our dressing as we choose, our leaving the home. In fact, allowing in childhood is launched into adolescence and then into adulthood. Our release from dependency from our parents happen in each of the leavings that has launched us into the wide world. The blessing of allowing equips us to meet the challenges when we are faced and keep facing. You're always going to have to face challenges. No matter what challenges you face, you have the ability in you to overcome it. And that's what allowing does. So there we go. We got through all of the 5 keys to mindful loving by David Richo. I love this book. We will continue on next week. Let me see what I got going on next week. Nothing. I got nothing going on. So next Sunday evening, afternoon, I don't know how my day is going to flesh out, but probably like around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'll be back on and we'll continue. They talk about the ego, mindset of the ego, unconditional presence versus the 5 mindsets of the ego. we're going to get into that next time. I'm Dr. Alicia. I guess I'm supposed to like tell you what you're doing, but I'm Dr. Alicia. You can contact me at Coaching with Dr. Alicia. We're reading this book. It is an amazing book. I love it. Look at that, 20th edition. So this book's been around for a while, translated in a bunch of different languages. And I think these people got it right. This is how we can break through the toxicity of our culture. And y'all got to practice the 5 A's and come back and let us know how's it been going with you and how your relationships have been transformed with this knowledge. I think it would be really nice. Anyway, goodbye, Angie. Goodbye, Dr. Vibe. Goodbye, Dennis, and everyone else who's here with me. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.